I built my entire empire on a single principle: control. Control over every dollar in the financial report. Control over every small detail in partner contracts. And even control over seemingly trivial things, like the refrigerator at home. My name is Aidan Cross, founder of Cross Intel Technologies. And if you ask anyone who has ever worked with me, they'll say, he never overlooks anything. So, I didn't get angry when I started noticing small things, going missing a box of pasta, a few apples, and some painkillers from my medicine cabinet. I didn't blame anyone. I just felt off. The instinct that took me from a broke college student to a billionaire stirred again. Something was wrong, and I had to find out what. At first, I thought it was just an oversight. Maybe the chef forgot to report the ingredients used. Someone on the household staff may have taken something by mistake. But when the missing items started disappearing regularly, in cycles by week, I knew it wasn't random. I didn't ask. I didn't interrogate. I didn't give orders. I waited, and I watched. Wednesday night, instead of heading home on my usual route, I circled 2 blocks around and parked 2 blocks away from the mansion. I turned off the engine. I turned off the lights, sat silently in the car in the dark, like a stranger stalking his own house. I didn't know what I was waiting for, until she appeared. Lena Rivera, the quietest housekeeper among all the staff. She had worked for me for nearly 6 years. I never once requested extended leave, never complained. She was like air ambient light in the house, present, but unnoticed. I saw her step out the gate carrying 2 large grocery bags so heavy she had to stop midway to catch her breath. And I felt something slide across my chest. Not anger, not betrayal, but shame. Shame from realizing I had never looked at her face in 6 years. I quietly followed. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I stepped onto the subway, into the crowd, the honking, the announcements, the grinding steel on tracks. I had forgotten that the city had another layer, one that didn't live under chandeliers, but under peeling ceilings and thumping music from worn-out apartments. She didn't walk fast, but she was steady. I never once looked back. I never once suspected someone was following. We arrived at an old apartment complex, peeling paint on the walls and elevators out of order. She walked up to the 4th floor. Each step was slow and labored. I stopped just outside the door when I heard her voice. Her voice wasn't tired, wasn't annoyed. It was warm, very warm. "Mom's home, sweetheart. I brought the bread you like." "Mom, the doctor said my blood pressure dropped again." "I know, love. This week we'll split the meds again like always. It'll be okay." I froze. Not from a moral shock, but because the truth was so clear, it didn't need to be spoken. I turned away. I didn't let them know I was there. I don't even remember how I drove back home. I just knew that in my chest was a weight I'd never felt. Not the weight of betrayal, but shame. It's a shame that I had lived so long in a world of the important people. I had forgotten that the quiet ones fight each day to survive. The next morning I sat beside a cup of coffee. Nothing had changed, but everything was different. Lena still cleaned as usual. Not a glance, not a word. But for the first time I saw her, and I knew this was only the beginning. A door had opened, and I could never close it again. I began to pay attention to Lena. Not in the surface-level way I used to, how wealthy employers watch their staff just enough to ensure nothing's going wrong, but a kind of observation. Silent, wordless. I noticed how she always wore slippers that made no sound. She wiped the table with her left hand because her right hand seemed weak. She opened the medicine cabinet with trembling fingertips, then quickly slipped something into her pocket as if nothing had happened. I started to memorize the silences in the house. The times she left earlier than usual. The moments she lingered a little too long at the sink. The evenings she left for the day, while I sat quietly by the second-floor window, watching her slight silhouette disappear at the base of the hill. I didn't ask. I didn't confront her. I just watched. And then I followed her again. That day was a Saturday. I dressed and pulled a cab low, just another anonymous figure in the city. Lena didn't go home. She passed through a narrow alley and crossed a makeshift market, carrying a cardboard box that must have weighed 10 kilograms. I kept my distance following until we reached a small building on the edge of town, Bridgepoint Community Center. A place I'd never heard of despite owning 7 luxury office towers across the city. She walked in. Children swarmed around her. Some hugged her. Some called her name with excitement. Then she pulled books out of the box, opened one, and started reading. Her voice rang out clear, warm, magnetic. I froze. Lena, the quiet housekeeper in my $60 million mansion, ran a reading group for underprivileged children. By herself. No sponsors. No recognition. No cameras. No applause. Just children mesmerized. And me standing outside the window, an outsider peering into a world that felt distant, yet deeply real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the main hallway lined with hundreds of certificates, medals, golden trophies, and excellence awards. All of them suddenly felt faded. Meaningless. None of them spoke of a woman who split her medication with her son to stretch out survival. None of them honored the bravery of a mother who skipped meals to buy printer paper for the reading group she sustained with her hands. Sunday morning, I broke the routine. I followed Lena to the public hospital, where she often took her son Evan for checkups. I stayed in the car and didn't reveal myself, just watched. She spoke to the receptionist in a quiet voice. I don't have enough money yet. Could we take half the prescription first? The system doesn't allow partial scripts, ma'am. I'm sorry. I walked in. Calm, not dramatic. A quick call to Dr. Kent, an old friend now the head of internal medicine. A request. A nod. Everything settled in 15 minutes. When Lena stepped out and saw me, she wasn't surprised. She wasn't angry. She wasn't confused. She just looked. Straight. Calm. You followed me again. Yes. Why? At first it was suspicion, then curiosity. Now, I don't know. Maybe because I want to understand. She was silent, then said slowly, "We're not a charity case. I don't need pity. I know. I don't want to owe anyone. You don't owe me anything. I'm not helping because you're weak. I'm helping because I admire you." For the first time, her eyes met mine, direct, unguarded. In those eyes was the exhaustion of someone who had endured too much, yet refused to fall. I had met many powerful people, but no one had ever made me feel as small as she did. That night, I returned home. It's still the same mansion with 10 bedrooms, but it no longer felt like I belonged. I looked in the mirror. Staring back was no longer Aidan Cross, tech billionaire. It was just a man, seeing life clearly for the first time in many years. I don't remember exactly when I began to change. Maybe it was when I started lingering in front of the mirror a little longer each morning. Maybe it was when I passed by the kitchen and paused to hear Lena quietly hum a lullaby of some kind, no clear words, but strangely warm. Maybe it was when I stopped turning on the morning financial news and instead played the radio to hear authentic human voices. I no longer followed Lena, but I began to show up, not as her employer, not as the man who paid Evan's medical bills, just simply being there, sitting under the awning every Sunday morning. I typed on my laptop, but secretly watched her hang clothes beside the trees. Some days I went with her to the community center, carried books, wiped the board, sat and read with the kids. At first, Lena didn't say anything. She just looked at me with wary eyes. But one morning, while I was quietly stacking books with bent covers, she walked over and said softly, "You're distracting me." I looked up. "Because I'm making noise." "No. Because you're sitting still in a weird way the kids think you're the CEO of some gaming company. I laughed for the first time. And so did she. It had been a long time since I heard a laugh that didn't come from my mouth but went straight into my chest. One late afternoon after a reading session, when the center had emptied, Lena motioned for me to stay. She opened a back door, a small room with a tin roof inside, hung with crayon drawings. Messy but vibrant, the handiwork of the kids themselves. In the corner was an old wooden box filled with folded notes. Miss Lena, I feel sad today. I want more dinosaur books. Do you know where my dad is? She placed her hand on the box, looked at me and said in a hoarse voice, "These are what keep me from giving up." I looked at the box of letters, said nothing. I just felt a lump tighten in my throat. Back home, I opened my phone. I didn't check the stock market for the first time in 8 years. I typed, "How to start a children's book fund." The next morning, I called my legal team. "We're starting a community book fund." For PR branding, they asked. "No." "So the kids can read." In less than 2 weeks, the fund was born. It didn't carry my name. There was no press release. Just a handwritten letter sent to Lena. "I can't teach the kids anything, but I can give you the tools to do it your way." She didn't reply to the letter. But the next morning, there was a small box of pastries on my kitchen counter, neatly placed with a note, "Thank you, but stop calling me Miss. Just call me Lena like a friend." I laughed. And for the first time in many years, I thought, maybe I've just made a real friend. It was a Tuesday, a day that seemed completely ordinary. I had just finished a board meeting when I received a text. "Evan had a seizure. In the ER. Don't come. I'll update you later." Lena. I didn't think. I didn't speculate. I dropped everything, ran to the parking garage, and drove straight to the hospital. When I arrived, Lena was sitting motionless in the waiting area. Her hands gripped the strap of her bag tightly. Her eyes red, but not a single tear fell. I was about to place a hand on her shoulder, but the moment I touched her, she looked up. "Why did you come?" I froze. "You told me not to, but I couldn't stay away." She bowed her head and sighed. Her voice seemed to dissolve into the air. "I hate being vulnerable in front of you, but this time, I'm terrified." I sat down beside her. They didn't say a word. It didn't offer comfort. Just let that fear expand and settle between us. Evan was in isolation. A doctor came. His face was grave. "Evan's heart condition has reached a dangerous threshold. We need to proceed with cardiac support surgery as soon as possible. But what? The insurance won't cover it. It's a high-level procedure not listed under standard support. The hospital fees will be significant." I didn't give Lena a chance to respond. "I'll cover everything." No, Lena stood up abruptly. Her eyes blazed. "Don't you get it? If Evan survives and knows his mother is indebted to a man because of money, he'll carry that burden for the rest of his life." I looked at her calmly but firmly. "Then, don't see it as charity. See it as a commitment. From me to Evan, not to you." Why? Because I once lived a life without meaning, and that boy with a fragile smile showed me what hope is. We didn't say anything else. She turned away, standing before the glass window of the ICU. I quietly signed the paperwork. No negotiation needed. The surgery took place 3 days later. Lena never left the hospital. She barely slept, barely ate. I survived on black coffee. I stayed too through the entire time. Not as her boss, not as a financial sponsor, just as a man who didn't want anyone to face pain alone. After 6 hours, the surgeon came out. It was a success. Evan will need a long recovery, but he made it through. Lena collapsed into a chair. Her whole body shook. I thought she would cry, but she didn't. She reached over and grasped my hand. They didn't look at me. They didn't speak. But that grip, it was stronger than any thank you. She had given me something more valuable than gratitude trust. That night, I stayed at the hospital, sat in the hallway. I watched Lena tuck a blanket over her son, then drift into a light sleep beside his hospital bed. I opened my phone and was about to check my emails when I saw a message from Alexandra, my niece. You missed the shareholders' meeting this morning. People are starting to ask questions. I replied with one line. Some things matter more than stock. That day, I lost a part of my old world, but I found something far more precious than power, a reason not to live just for myself. 3 days after the successful surgery, I returned to the office to handle some pending tasks. The moment I stepped in, my assistant handed me a stack of documents, eyes wary. Miss Alexandra is waiting for you in the private meeting room. She doesn't look happy. I sighed. It was time to face it. Alexandra, my niece, the one I'd treated like my own daughter, the one I had entrusted with my legacy, was sitting glacial, as if ready to declare war. Do you know what people are whispering? Uncle, a man like you, wealthy, powerful, suddenly disappearing from every social function, all because of a housemaid. I sat across from her calm. Her name is Lena, and she's the mother of a saved child. Don't use emotions to justify weakness, Uncle James. Since when did you lose your reason? I looked at her. I wasn't angry. I just felt disappointed, since I realized some things are more important than balance sheets. She's using you. Who turns down medical fees without an ulterior motive? Everything is too perfect not to be part of a plan. I squinted. For the first time, Alexandra no longer looked like the innocent niece I once knew, but a woman fiercely protecting her power at all costs. Not everyone thinks like you. Some people are just trying to survive. Alexandra stood up. Her voice sharpened. If you don't stop this, don't blame me for taking action to protect the family legacy. The board won't stay silent forever. I didn't respond. I watched her walk away, her high heels echoing sharp and cold against the marble floor. Family. I used to think it was the one place you didn't need to be on guard. But now I understand. Not everyone who shares your blood wants what's best for you. That evening, I stopped by the hospital. Lena was reading to Evan. The boy could already manage a faint smile, though his voice was still weak. I brought a bag of new books, comic books, science books, even one on human heart anatomy. Evan lit up. Uncle James, a book about hearts. I nodded, smiling. Because you're the only person who's made me care how a heart works. After Evan fell asleep, Lena pulled me into the hallway. Her voice was low, concerned. I heard from a nurse. You're a primary investor in this hospital. I nodded. It's just a small part of my portfolio. Then why are you doing everything for me and Evan? You didn't send your assistant. You didn't send a rep. You came to the hospital. You waited. You brought books. You even bought orange juice. I looked deeply into her eyes. Because this is the first time I want to do something myself without needing a contract. Aren't you afraid people will misunderstand? Of course, but I'm more afraid of missing something important just because I feared gossip. Lena was silent. She didn't respond. But for the first time, she leaned lightly on my shoulder. Not guarded, not distant, just a woman who'd been fighting too long and was finally too tired. I don't need a savior, James. I know. But you deserve someone to walk beside you. When I left the hospital, it was late. My phone vibrated again. A message from Alexandra, emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday. If you don't show up, they'll decide without you. I smirked faintly. and replied with a single sentence, "I've already chosen where I stand." Don't wait. Monday morning. The emergency meeting began on time. Conference room 59th floor, once the epicenter of power at Kingsley Holdings, now felt colder than ever. Shareholders, lawyers, and strategic advisors were all present. My chair is empty. Alexandra sat at the head of the table, her expression calm, but her eyes calculating. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kingsley will not be attending. The report states that his recent lack of transparency seriously affects the company's image." A middle-aged shareholder interjected, "You mean the unexplained donations? The unannounced absences?" "Exactly. And he's been frequently seen at a slum area, even caught on camera multiple times. Are you suggesting we consider replacing the executive chairman?" Alexandra nodded, voice firm. "If James is no longer fit to lead, we need someone who can control their emotions and prioritize the company's interests above all else." At that very moment, I was sitting on an old wooden bench at a small community center, surrounded by laughter and the sound of children reading. Lena sat not far from me, helping a boy piece together syllables. She had no idea that today was the meeting to determine the future of the empire I had built. I looked at her, the children, and the cramped room full of life. And I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be, where the heart leads, not where control demands. That evening, Alexandra came to find me. I had just finished setting the table, Pasta Evan's favorite dish. "You didn't show up at the meeting. Everyone thinks you're hiding." I didn't look at her. I quietly poured more water for Lena and wiped Evan's mouth. "I'm not hiding. I'm choosing. You're giving up 20 years of building everything for a woman and a child who aren't even family." I put the glass down and looked her in the eye. "No, I'm giving it up because I finally understand what it means to live true to myself." Alexandra stayed silent, but her eyes started to waver. "You know they'll strip your title if you don't respond. They can take the title, but not the value I've just rediscovered. What about your reputation? The media is already speculating you're being manipulated." I shrugged. "Even better. Let them learn that a man who knows how to love is not weak." After Alexandra left in silence, Lena walked over. She had heard most of the conversation. "You didn't have to do that. For me." I turned to her gently. "Lena, you're not the reason I changed. You're the mirror, reflecting the humanity I had forgotten for too long." She looked at me, voice choked. "You won't regret this, no. Because I've never felt more alive than I do right now." The next morning, an email was sent to all shareholders. I officially resigned from my executive role at Kingsley Holdings. Not because of failure, but because I have fulfilled my former role and am ready for a new chapter that doesn't come with a salary. I closed the laptop, and together with Lena, they brought books to a small school in the suburbs. The children cheered when they saw me. Evan ran up and hugged me, asking, "Did you bring more space books today?" I tousled his hair and smiled. I did. And this time, I brought a new dream too. The story of James Kingsley, abandoning a billion-dollar empire to support a single mother, began to spread beyond the small local community. A social blogger happened to capture a photo of James reading books to children at the community center. The photo was reshared tens of thousands of times with the headline, "From cold CEO to the man bringing books to the poor." What is James Kingsley? Hiding soon after tabloid websites, financial podcasts, and talk shows began to spin their own stories. Billionaire seduced by housemaid Lena, the single mother who made Kingsley give up power. Lena began to notice strange stares when walking down the street. One day, a group of reporters showed up outside the center, thrusting microphones toward her. "Are you why James Kingsley stepped down from his company? Do you have a special relationship with him? Are you taking advantage of his sympathy?" Evan clung to his mother, eyes brimming with tears. Lena pulled him inside, voice trembling. "No one gets to scare Evan. No one." That night I came by. She didn't open the door immediately. When she did, her eyes were red. They're calling me a gold digger. They say Evan is just an excuse for me to climb higher. I walked in, said nothing, and held her. They don't know the truth. And I won't let them define you. I don't want Evan to grow up surrounded by venomous words. You're not a scandal. You're proof that people can change, and if necessary, I'll tell them everything. The next day, I appeared voluntarily in a live national TV interview. When the host asked, "Did you step down from Kingsley Holdings because of a woman?" I nodded. Yes, but not in the way people think. So it was because of feelings, no. It was because she made me face myself. I used to think I knew what success was, but she showed me that success isn't about position or bank accounts. It's about being able to give and transform someone's life. The host continued, "Aren't you worried that Lena and her son will face more scrutiny?" I am. But I will be by their side, because I didn't come to them with pity. I came with admiration. At the end of the interview, I looked straight into the camera. Don't call her a housemaid. Call her the woman who gave a man like me a reason to start over. Back at the community center, Lena stood frozen after hearing the news about the interview. Evan looked up at his mother. "You're not sad anymore, right?" She hugged him, smiling truly for the first time in many stormy days. "No, sweetheart, because someone spoke up for me." The next morning, Lena found a strange envelope in front of her door. The handwriting was firm and familiar. Give yourself a moment of silence to realize you truly deserve peace. JK enclosed were 2 plane tickets and an address, Isle of Skye, Scotland. That evening, James showed up at her door unannounced as always. You don't have to go if you're not ready. But if you agree, this won't be running away. It'll be a journey to begin again. For you, for Evan, and maybe for me too. Lena stayed silent for a long time, then nodded. "We'll go, but only for a few days." James smiled. "Just a few days, I promise." 3 days later, the Isle of Skye. A small wooden cottage nestled in a pine forest. No cell signal, no reporters, just the sound of wind and waves crashing against the shore. Evan ran along the beach smiling freely for the first time without caution. Lena watched her son from the balcony and softly said, "He deserves these moments." James replied gently, "So do you." Night fell. The cabin was lit only by the fireplace. Lena sat by the window, holding a cup of tea, eyes gazing into the distance. "I used to think I had to be strong alone. I thought opening up meant weakness." James didn't interrupt. He just listened. "But maybe being strong is allowing someone to see your cracks and still stay." She turned to him. "Why are you still here?" He looked up into her eyes. "Because ever since I saw you place that last pill bottle into your pocket, I knew. If you could fight alone for that long, you deserve someone to fight beside you." The next day it rained. Evan discovered an old library in the small town and pulled James inside. Eyes sparkling. "Are there books about doctors?" James smiled. "Not just that there are books about doctors who were once patients." The boy sat down and began reading intently. Lena watched them from afar. James stood under the stars by the cliffside that final night on the island. Lena came to him. "We leave tomorrow." I don't want to run anymore." "Then don't." "We won't run. We'll return. But this time, you won't just be a mother or a survivor. You'll be standing in front telling your story." Lena nodded slowly. "I'm ready. Not for you, but for myself. And, if you're coming with me, even better." James smiled and said nothing. He held her hand. When the plane landed, none of the 3 were the same people they had been. Lena, more assertive, more determined. Evan is more confident, and no longer lowers his head when someone mentions illness. James was no longer a cold billionaire, but a man who knew what mattered in life. Returning to the city, Lena was no longer the silent woman bowing her head in the kitchen of James Knight's mansion. She was a mother once overlooked by society, now ready to tell her own story, not for pity, but for hope. The first morning back, James's inbox overflowed. Who is she? Why is a billionaire involved with a maid who once stole Lena Porter, angel or manipulator of goodwill? The media smelled blood. They prowled, scrutinized, and twisted every detail of Lena's past. She stayed silent, but this time not out of fear. 1 week later, the country's biggest talk show. The host looked at Lena under the blinding studio lights. Did you ever steal medicine? Lena stared straight into the camera. Yes. You admit it. I admit I took pills from Mr. James Knight's house, not for profit, but to keep my son alive. The entire room went silent. She continued. There are people in this society like me forced to choose steal or let your loved one die. I chose life, and I am not ashamed of that. The host hesitated. But why didn't you ask for help? Why not reach out? Lena pressed her lips together. She reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of old papers, letters of rejection for medical aid, insurance denials, funding rejections. Because no one listened. No one wanted to hear a maid speak of her pain. But now I will no longer be silent. James watched from the backstage room, eyes glued to the monitor. A man who once believed in power and control now sat silently, hands clenched. After the broadcast, social media exploded. Lena isn't a victim. She's a hero. How many are suffering like her and her son every day? Lena's story is a wake-up call. I'm a doctor. I've seen kids like hers, and I saw myself in that boy's eyes. The next day, the network invited James Knight to join Lena on a special feature episode. The host asked, "You're a billionaire. Do you believe you were used?" James looked at Lena for a long moment, then answered, "No. I believe I was saved. Not by her cleverness or kindness, but by the truth. The truth is that we live in a world where too many pretend not to see." He turned to Lena. "And you were the first person I saw clearly." After the show, numerous charitable, medical, and educational organizations contacted Lena. They didn't just want to help Evan. They wanted Lena to be the voice and representative of the invisible women in society. Lena took the stage at the National Conference on Social Equality a week later, not as James Knight's maid, but as Lena Porter, founder of the Voice Project, helping single mothers, immigrants, and low-income workers access healthcare and education. The closing line of her speech was quoted across the country. "We don't need pity. We need to be heard. Because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen, to save a life." James Knight, the man who once held the most prized real estate portfolio in the city, sat atop every boardroom and wielded power that even lawmakers feared, suddenly announced he was stepping down from Knight Capital. The announcement was made during a press conference on Monday morning. Reporters fired questions. "Mr. Knight, is this due to public pressure following the Lena incident?" James calmly replied, "No, I'm not being forced. I choose to let go. I built a great empire, but no longer see myself in it." The board of directors was stunned. Stocks dipped slightly. Partners whispered, "He's lost his mind." "Don't tell me it's over a maid. What about the investment fund, the Asia expansion project?" But James no longer cared about the murmurs. He had already prepared a succession plan, transferring full executive power to a nonprofit board named the Horizon Trust. The trust's goal wasn't to maximize profit, but to build free hospitals for children with rare diseases, fund full scholarships for students from low-income families, establish legal centers to support exploited workers, primarily supporting grassroots community models like Lena's Voice Project. Alexandra, his niece once fiercely opposed, came to see James. You're destroying everything we built. James shook his head. No, I'm rebuilding. With something more enduring than power, compassion. She looked at him for a long moment, said nothing. I just walked away. But this time, without slamming the door. That evening, James went to Lena's house. No call ahead. I just stood outside with a box. Lena opened the door, surprised skipping another billion-dollar meeting. James smiled. No, I've skipped the entire company. You what? He handed her the box. Inside was a copy of the handover agreement, along with a nomination for Lena to join the advisory board of the Horizon Trust. Lena was stunned, nearly unable to believe it. You're crazy. James nodded. Maybe. But if the alternative is going back to that numb life, I'd rather be crazy like this. She stayed silent. James continued. You once said, no one needs pity. I don't pity you. I want to work with you, learn from you, share the role of guiding others, with you. After a long pause, Lena finally said, I'm not sure I fit on any advisory board. I once thought I only belonged in a CEO chair. Turns out I was wrong. And if you agree, we'll start again. Not with titles, but with values. That night, they didn't talk strategy or planning. They sat in Lena's small kitchen sipping tea as usual, listening to Evan's laughter from the next room, and talked about the children they had never met, but now had the chance to help. 6 months after James Knight announced his departure from Knight Capital and founded the Horizon Trust, quiet yet powerful changes began to ripple through the city, into corners where faint voices never used to reach beyond the peeling walls of boarding houses. At the community center, where Lena still taught every Saturday afternoon, it was no longer just children like Evan. Now there were dozens of single mothers, immigrant workers, young adults who had dropped out of school because survival took priority over education. One day Lena proposed, we'll organize a public forum. It's not a fancy seminar, just a place where those who've never been heard can speak. The event was called Voice. We are here. No gimmicks, no celebrity guests, just real people, telling real stories, to an audience willing to listen. Evan opened the event. He stood trembling behind the mic, but his eyes held confidence. I used to think I wouldn't make it to my 10th birthday, but now I want to be a doctor, because someone once told me, your heart is stronger than your illness. The room fell silent, then burst into thunderous applause. After Evan came more stories. A young woman recounting her escape from an abusive marriage and her journey to teach children with special needs. He was a worker who had been unpaid for months, standing up not just for himself, but for others like him. A 72-year-old woman reading her poetry aloud for the first time, poems about motherhood and years of serving family and society unnoticed. But the most powerful story came from Alexandra James's niece. She stepped onto the stage under the spotlight, slightly hesitant. I was the one who once called everything here madness. I believed power was control secrecy and winning through silence. But then, I stood in the slum where Lena teaches, and I heard laughter. Laughter, without fear. That moment I understood. True power is making people feel safe enough to laugh. The forum ended with a chorus sung by the very people who were once mute in society. We don't need saving. We need to be seen. The next morning, newspapers all ran headlines. A new platform for social change. Not charity. Empowerment, from billion-dollar empire to 1,000-heart community. James Knight's no-looking-back journey. And the most important thing, community projects began springing up everywhere. Single mothers formed a group called Seed Givers, teaching life skills and literacy to women without access to education. A fleet of mobile libraries was named after the silent but strong Evan Carmen Maria. Former Maid's guards and freelancers were invited as community advisors, helping build policies from the ground up. 1 year after the Voice Forum, the community center on the city's east side was no longer a run-down one-story house with a rusted fence. Thanks to funding and the voluntary participation of hundreds of people, it had become a multi-purpose complex for education care and social counseling, operating 7 days a week. Its new name was the Listening House. No flashy signage, no media slogans. Just a small gate with a hand-carved line, where every voice carries weight. Lena no longer taught alone. She now led a team of over 40 volunteers, including several who were once her students. Evan, now 13, and recovering well after his surgery, was the first to start a class called Telling Stories Through the Eyes, helping young kids express emotions and courage through facial expression and spoken words. At a speaking event in front of nearly 1,000 students at a prestigious private school, the boy said, "I wasn't born with everything, but I was born with a mother who never gave up, and a man who once believed money was everything, but now knows that human kindness is the greatest capital." At the former headquarters of Knight Capital, a quiet but significant event took place. James officially transferred 80% of his assets into the Horizons Trust, an independent foundation dedicated to supporting community education healthcare for women and children, retraining programs for the unemployed. No one received commissions. No names were carved into golden walls. In the evenings, James no longer attended power dinners. Instead, he often visited Lena's small apartment, a place with warm yellow lights, classical music, and a cup of hot cinnamon tea. One night, when everyone had gone to sleep, Lena sat beside James holding a journal with a torn spine. "I used to write every day, afraid that if I didn't, the pain would swallow me whole." James gently touched the cover. "Do you still write?" Lena smiled. "Yes, but not to escape anymore. Now, I am writing to remind you that we made it through, and we're building something." James slowly pulled out a small box. No flashy proposal, no candles, no flowers. Not to marry in the traditional sense, but to ask Lena Westwood, "Would you walk this path with me?" As a companion, a partner, and a believer, Lena didn't answer right away. She took his hand. I held it tightly and nodded. That was their way. Not loud, just certain. The final scene was a crisp autumn morning at the Listening House. Children were reading books under a tree. Mothers were learning new skills. Evan was showing his friends how to give a presentation. And in one corner of the veranda, James and Lena were restacking newly donated books together. A volunteer snapped a candid photo and posted it to social media with the caption, "Two people who were once invisible to each other, now making the whole world feel a little clearer." Curtain falls, but not the end. As James wrote in the final letter to himself, not all journeys end with fireworks. Some end with a simple nod and a whispered truth, "We did it. Now let's keep going."